it strategy or showbiz? What's really powering the McLaren Mastercard alliance? On this episode of Media Dialogues with Storyboard 18, I sit down for an exclusive conversation with the man steering one of Formula One's most iconic teams, McLaren CEO Zak Brown, and the marketer behind some of the world's most powerful brand plays, Mastercard Global CMO Rajamannar. From engineering excellence to entertainment-driven fandom, from racing wins to consumer loyalty, we decode what it really takes to win on the track and in the marketplace. Hello and welcome to the show, Raja and Zak. It's brilliant to have you both here with me today. And Raja, I'll come to you first with the critical question here. What was the single biggest driving force for you behind the McLaren and Mastercard partnership and the coming together of these two major brands? Was it about performance on the track, brand synergy, or consumer engagement of it?
See, for us, we have always been trying to address the passions of consumers, which means people are passionate about various things. And how can we get them closer to their passion and give them immersive experiences, and in the process, elevate our brand in their minds and hearts? And that was how we have actually started looking at everything since 2013. And sports is one of the very important passion categories. And within sports, we saw that Formula One was the fastest growing sport. So Formula One was what was decided. And in the context of Formula One, we did incredible amount of research and due diligence. And we found that, number one, McLaren was by far the most loved brand. Number two, 40% of women have rated McLaren as the brand that they really that they admire, and it's their number one brand. And women is a very important category, and unbelievably, 40% of the audience are women. That's number two. Number three, and very importantly, Zak is actually, before becoming the CEO, he is a hardcore quintessential marketing person who puts fans first. And we have exactly the same language that we speak. The chemistry was fantastic between our teams, and therefore it almost became a no-brainer to us not only to get into the partnership to begin with, but also to elevate it to a title sponsorship this year, based on the last 1 year experience we had with McLaren, which was absolutely fantastic.
Zak, I was gonna save this question for later, but I'll ask you this now. As Raja pointed out, 50%, nearly 40% of Formula One's fan base is now women, thanks in large part to the Netflix boom. McLaren has, of course, been at the center of that cultural surge. And since Raja pointed out that you're a marketer at heart, let me put this to you this way. What's harder for you, winning races or winning brand love?
Neither is easy. For starters, but both critically important. I think, picking up on what Raja said, we're all about the fans. The sport has grown tremendously, especially with youth and women in North America. Those were three key aspects of what Formula One needed to do to continue to grow as a global sport. Unlike Raja, who did a tremendous amount of research on who to partner with, for us, it was a very easy decision. We didn't need to do any research on Mastercard because obviously an extremely loved brand that's been very experienced in sport, speaks to billions of consumers. And at the end of the day, we recognize we're in the sport and entertainment business that is one and the same, and that we're all about our fans. And I can't think of a better partner to have, and very proud to be McLaren Mastercard next year moving forward, because together our shared passion of brand love and winning on and off the track, we're going to do some magical things for millions and millions of fans around the world.
Raja, any preview, to some of these magical things that are about to come?
I'm happy to give a few points out there. So we have experimented with this concept of curating experiences that money cannot buy, but you can only get them through MasterCard. Now, this journey across all the passion points has given us an incredible amount of learning, and so much so that we even bought a company that specialized in curating and that specializes in curating these experiences. We are bringing to F1 everything that we have learned across all the other passion points. A couple of examples, like we have just launched something called Team Priceless. So where we take some fans, super fans literally, of McLaren and enable them to visit certain races and experience the inside goings on, so to speak, like the backstage experiences. They get very close to the garage. They meet with the drivers, and they are even probably a part of the briefing sessions, which are highly confidential. And it's so thrilling for people to be there in that kind of an ambience and environment, and be a part of and have the inside track, which is extremely exciting. And that's just one of the zillions of ideas that we have got. We already brought some to life, and we are bubbling with ideas. And I think you'll see a ton of fun that's ahead of us.
Zach, McLaren today is one of the strongest commercial brands in F1 with Formula One's global boom. How do you see balancing competitiveness on track with commercial positioning in a sport that's becoming as much about entertainment as engineering? Where do you really draw that line between showbiz and racing so the team isn't seen as more entertainment than engineering?
It's an interesting debate that some have. I think sport and entertainment is one and the same. So I don't think you need to draw a difference or a balance. If you're buying tickets to a movie, a fireworks show, a rock concert, a sporting event, it's entertainment. And I think, as Raja said, we're in a unique position as a sport where at Team Priceless, you can sit in the dugout. If this was baseball, you could be on the field. If this was football, you could be in the locker room when we're doing our debriefs. I mean, it's unbelievable the amount of access that Team Priceless is going to be able to offer our collective fans. So we're in a very unique sport. Of course, the racing drivers, when the helmet goes on and the race starts, everyone's laser focused, but there's absolutely no reason why fans can't participate in that entire journey. So I think it's all one and the same, which makes it quite easy to operate. We feel the passion from our fans, and that fuels us to success.
You also came into F1 as a marketer and a deal maker. What were some of the key decisions you made that made this transform McLaren brand and performance culture? And transformation, not just on the track, of course, but for legacy fans, for an entire new generation of F1 fans. What did you do, Zach?
Yeah, you have your avid fans, people such as myself who've been around the sport for 30 plus years, and then your trend fans, which you want to turn into avid fans, those that are newer followers to our sport that have discovered the sport recently. I think the single biggest difference with McLaren, and kind of secret to our success, if you'd like, is our inclusivity of our fans, of our partners, of our team members. So, all the Formula One teams have wonderful technology and wind tunnels and CFD, which is all critically important. But it's people that's the secret sauce at McLaren. It's our culture, the way we include our fans, our team members, family. And so that's what we very much focus on. We call it now the papaya era. We went back to our iconic colors, which Bruce McLaren, our founder, started in papaya. And we went back to papaya when we started this quest to get back to the front, because it's what the fans told us what they want. So we listen to our fans, we engage with our fans, and these experiences that we're talking about, only 1% of our fan base actually attend races. So creating these experiences well at Team Priceless digitally, so we can reach larger quantities of people and get them exposed to our sport, is critically important. So there's live experiences at racetrack. We did some great events in London leading into the British Grand Prix, where we had 40,000 people and kind of took over the city. So that's another way that we can introduce and engage with our fans. And then, of course, in today's digital age, you can reach tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people. And again, you come back to Mastercard. When we looked at who would be the perfect partner for us, it's someone that shares our same brand values, has a passion for sport and entertainment, and reaches billions of consumers. So our research, as I mentioned earlier, was about that long.
Now, of course, you're working with Raja, who is an Indian origin global leader. India is one of the world's fastest growing economies and markets for international brands. Zach, I want to know what's your take on India, the market, the economy, the consumers?
All the time. And absolutely, we need to be in India. And when you look at where the sport needs to grow, if you were to kind of list the territories, India would be right at the top. Now, Formula One was in India. This probably was about 15 years ago, and disappointed, quite frankly, that we're not there. We need to be there. It's a huge market with great consumers, massive population, and we're a global sport. So I think India is a big hole in our calendar, quite frankly, and that is, not only on McLaren's radar, but very much Formula One's radar. And I hope to get back there because we were there, as I mentioned, about 15 years ago. It was massively popular, and so maybe someone will be watching this show that can make it happen.
That's great to hear, and I do hope it starts here as well. You spoke about access and inclusivity earlier in the conversation, Zach, and that being central to McLaren's brand transformation. Given how traditionally, F1 has always been closed off, it's always been that way historically. Did you face any resistance in driving this cultural shift?
I think in the early days, it took a little bit of time for some teams to embrace the new ways of working. So an example of that is when Netflix came out, 2 teams didn't participate year one because it had historically been a very kind of closed sport, a look but don't touch type of environment. I think for me personally, it comes back to my first Grand Prix, which is 1981, the Long Beach Grand Prix. I met my first racing driver. I saw the cars close up, and I remember it to this day. So, our drivers stop for every fan, every time someone approaches me in an airport or a racetrack. I remember all my great experiences in sport. And quite frankly, I remember some of the less great experiences where you've met some athletes that, were your heroes and you were a bit disappointed once you met them. And so I think, we make sure that we give a great experience to every fan engagement. It's something that comes very naturally to us. And I think, again, it comes back to being in the sport and entertainment business and recognizing that without fans, there's no Formula One, there's no McLaren.
On a personal leadership level, how important was it for you, Zach, to embed inclusion into McLaren's culture? Of course, not just as a company and its values, but also as something you actively drove yourself.
Yeah, I think making sure everyone in the racing team recognizes, which they do, the importance of the fan and the access that we provide. So, when we go to the racetrack, we're not just exclusively thinking about the performance of the race car. Of course, that's what the engineers are doing and the racing drivers are doing, but we're very conscious to the environment that we create, the access that we give to our fans. And so that's very top of mind. So we have a new hospitality unit, a new paddock club, which is where, it's a very privileged environment and exclusive access to be able to get involved in the paddock club. So we've invested as much off the track to be able to give a very enhanced experience to our fans as much as we invest on front wings and rear wings and floors of our race car for performance.
What does McLaren ultimately hope to gain from partnerships like the one with Mastercard, beyond, of course, just the commercial value and proposition?
Ultimately, more fans and more engaged fans. And so you could kind of break those into 3 categories, if you'd like. There's the avid fan, and how do we serve their needs? And those tend to be the more experienced fans. So, they're looking for certain access because of their understanding of the sport. Then you've got the trend fan, which is your newer fan, which is, hey, what's this Formula One thing everyone's talking about? How do you get them over time to be avid fans? And then, of course, when you look at the reach of Mastercard, how do we introduce new people to the sport? We're not done growing the sport and youth and more diversity and having larger territories such as India. So how do we get new people introduced to have them go from not fans to avid fans? So you've really got kind of three buckets of consumers, if you'd like, of McLaren Mastercard's partnership, and we think Mastercard's going to be able to help us in all three of those categories, if you'd like, of fans.
Zach, give me a little bit of an insight here, into the inner workings, really. How do you ensure your drivers not only perform on track, but also embody the McLaren culture that you spoke about earlier and meet fans' expectations? Because expectations are certainly very high right now.
That's all part of the recruitment process. Of course, when we're looking at the racing drivers to get in our race car, number one is we want to make sure the fastest drivers in the world. But beyond that, and as important, is who they are, the culture they set with our fans, the culture that they set within the racing team. So there are drivers in Formula One that are huge talents, which would not be my first choice as a McLaren driver, because I don't think they necessarily fit our brand and our partners' brands and share our values. So I think, Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri were handpicked by both of us. Both of their debuts were in McLaren. Clearly, we were sold on their raw speed and talent. But as important, it's who they are as individuals. And you look at how they're battling it out for the championship now and the amount of respect that they have for each other, the competitiveness, but how well they get along. And ultimately what's happening is they're elevating each other's game and they're making the racing team better. So, and that's part of our recruiting profile, not just of the drivers, but everybody in the racing team. And that's what ultimately creates the right culture, is having the right people.
Raja, how are you planning to scale the McLaren partnership across global markets? Are you looking at experiences like co-branded cards or exclusive access programs for India as well? Could those models be replicated across other emerging markets?
Yeah, see, firstly, we are trying to get closer to our customers and consumers. And as the world is getting more and more competitive, we have to find more and more layers of opportunities that will really allow us to win and keep our customers and consumers. Now, as an example, even in countries where Formula One racing does not happen, like Romania, most recent example. So we partnered with a bank there called Banca Transylvania, and we launched the first co-brand between Mastercard, McLaren, and Banca Transylvania. So this particular card now, you would expect there is not even the F1 race that happens there. People are only watching, some people maybe over the television or streaming. Surprise, surprise, the card is getting such a fantastic reception. So we are winning some consumers who otherwise we may not have won, but who are avid fans of motorsport, and we are giving them the first opportunity in that marketplace. For McLaren, this is also a very tangible growth opportunity where now suddenly there are MasterCard customers who can be engaged by McLaren in a very meaningful, thoughtful fashion. Right. And when we are talking about these experiences, and well, Zach has correctly mentioned, there are some celebrities and there are some top personalities that you're dying to meet, that you're really a big fan of. But when you go there, their attitude sometimes is a little condescending and belittling, or they are brushing you off. And consumers actually remember those bad experiences as much or even more powerfully than the good experiences. Now, I have witnessed firsthand, whether it is Lando Norris or Oscar Piastri or Andrea Stella, who is their team person, what do you call team principal, and you have got Zach Brown himself, extremely down to earth, very warm, very welcoming, and not in a pretentious fashion. They are very genuinely good human beings who are interacting beautifully. So when we invite our clients or our consumers to any of these events for these experiences, and one of those is to meet these, drivers or Zach or Andrea or even some of the technical members, it's amazing to see how consistently good they are and how naturally, organically they are so good to the consumer. So people go away, and I have received hundreds of comments And I know saying that, my God, this is amazing and what an experience. And we have been following Formula One for God knows how many years, but this is the first time we could experience it so up close and so intimately with every aspect of Formula One sport. And that is really sort of already changing the trajectory for us. And therefore, when we started, we did not think of day one to have a title sponsorship. But the experience was so positive, and also interestingly, McLaren was the only title sponsor that was available. All the other 9 teams, they already had their title sponsors. And so when we saw this, it was an opportunity approached with Zach, and we discussed, and it was instantly, we said, this makes a ton of sense. It's not a cheap partnership by any stretch. As you can imagine, it's one of the most expensive sponsorships that we have across the entire portfolio that we have, but it seems to be worth every single penny. And India is a gigantic market, and not because I'm of Indian origin and I'm very biased towards India. The fact of the matter is today, sports other than cricket struggle to get the same level of visibility. But there are niches which are appearing. But the irony is, even a niche in India is much bigger than a whole country in some other continent.
That is
So
true.
each niche by itself has got magnificent scale that it makes it very well worthwhile to explore and launch these kind of products. And if I'm the guy who will predict down the line, do I see a McLaren card in India? I would love to make it happen.
Raja, I want to get your perspective on what kind of impact do you think the show Drive to Survive has had on the sport? Has it fundamentally changed the way engineering and entertainment come together in Formula One? What's your perspective?
See, there are 3 things which are happening. So, firstly, I must say, if I can just take a step back, before we got into F1, I was clueless about F1. I always felt that F1 was a sport. I said, what's a fun? I attended one many years back in Singapore. It was a night race. I was invited by somebody. I went there. I stood there. The cars, they all zip past you. And then nothing happens. You're looking at the TV to see what's happening. It's not live watching anymore. And again, the sound starts increasing. Then you're looking, again, the cars zip past. I said, what a stupid sport it is. Why would anyone want to watch this, right? And the noise is pretty intense. And I'm a little sensitive to sound. I said, no, this is not the sport for me. But then, post Netflix show, which had a huge impact on the sport, we started seeing the statistics go pretty dramatically up. So, Drive to Survive clearly had a very tangible impact on bringing new people, new audiences into the world of F1, number one. Number two, then I said, I need to understand because I cannot be leaving Mastercard out of such a growth area. So I have to start investing. So I binge watched every single episode of all the seasons of Drive to Survive. I saw Senna and I read about it. I saw so many documentaries. Literally, I was gorging everything that comes my way, anything with F1. I met with every single team, the top 5 teams, every one of them. I went and met, visited their factories, and saw how the experience was. Then slowly I started realizing, you know what? I think this sport, if you get into it, is going to draw you in pretty significant. Now I'm almost addicted to F1. But just about 18 months back or 2 years back, I just couldn't care less for this sport. Right. So this one. So which means the trick is if people are excited enough to come into the sport, they remain with the sport pretty deeply. Third, does it have relevance around the world, or is it only in those countries where the racing actually happens?
Right.
Even in the US, though 3 races were happening, in Vegas, Austin, and Miami, USA never had any big audience before. But that started taking off, and US market is pretty significant. Mostly it was European, a little bit South American, and a little bit Middle East. That's all it was like, but it's growing pretty rapidly. Talking specifically of India and Indian fans, now I've been to 6 or 7 races. Wherever I go, I can clearly say there is a big group of Indians who are attending, both as fans in the general grandstands and all that, but also in the paddock. So paddock is much more exclusive, and these are affluent consumers and customers of various teams or various brands. So you find that the Indian representation is already pretty sizable. So I see, therefore, the impact is going to be even more tangible and substantial as we move forward. And I think, like Zach has said, what a dream come true it will be for us as Mastercard, if F1 were to really, restart in India, and I hope and pray it does.
McLaren's turnaround is a powerful story in itself. You spoke about the strategic and the financial reasons behind the partnership. But as a marketer, how do you see the narrative of McLaren's comeback and that transformation? Because it wasn't the number one team when you started having the partnership conversation. The F1 conversion is real now. The challenge, I would assume now, is converting those trending fans into avid fans. How do you see that? How do you plan to make that leap?
It was fabulous, really, for us. It was absolutely fabulous. What happens is, if you look at the top, if you look at the 20 teams, 20 cars which are driving across the 10 teams, most of the TV coverage happens to the 1, 2, 3 teams. Unless there is something significant, some action happening at the back, most of the time it is the front runners who are always in the line of visibility. And therefore, the cost equation for the front ones is extremely, and it's expensive if you have to sponsor one of the top 3 teams. And what we found, firstly, at that time when we were discussing with McLaren, they were sort of 4 or 5 kind of number when we started having discussions with them. But when we did our analysis, we do something called momentum analysis. Who has the best momentum behind them? It was so beautiful that the curve was very evident that McLaren had everything that goes, not just in terms of number of wins, but a very, very comprehensive statistical analysis of various parameters and dimensions. We have done that, number one. Second, when I spoke with all the other teams, some teams were fantastic at engineering. Some teams were fantastic at aerodynamics. Some were great technology teams. McLaren was the one which came through to me as the most marketing-oriented team. Having said that, Zach himself was a race driver earlier in his career before he started the marketing agency. Now, when I spoke with him and I was asking some of the questions, like, Zach, you are not really a technology, engineering, aerodynamics kind of a guy. He says, look, I don't have to be. I get the best of the people with the right attitude and what you call fire in the belly to make things happen. I'll get those people, I'll get out of their way. And I enable them, I support them in every which way. I focus a lot on the commercial areas so that I'm able to get the revenues to support all the toys for these guys. Toys as in the wind tunnel and all those latest and the greatest and stuff like that. I thought that was pretty fascinating. And though McLaren was not the number one team at that point in time when we were having conversations, they were rated as number one by women. They were the most loved brand of all the brands in the racing world. And I said, this is something which is, an opportunity waiting to be actually seized. And then we went in. And I of course, had my own hesitation. It's so expensive, even at that level, compared to some of our other assets that we have. And we sponsor big ones like UEFA Champions League, French Open Tennis, Australian Open Tennis, Grammy Awards, Cannes Lions, Cannes Film Festival. We've got tons of assets. This is right there at the top. But then when we started looking at the ROI, the visibility, the recall, the association, the attribution, the modernity of MasterCard brand through all this stuff, it was really worth every penny. So then we said, okay, what next? And that's when I saw the opportunity for a title. And Zach has been resisting going for a title sponsorship for a while. And when we got into it, into the discussions, he said, you know what? If it was any other brand, I would have said no. MasterCard, it's a no-brainer. Let's do it. And then we just went ahead and announced it. And so it's going to start the title sponsorship with the 2026 season. Absolutely. And what we found is, we have this passion point strategy, which is if people are passionate about something, you give them what they cannot get elsewhere or through other means, experiences in that particular passion. They become diehard advocates for your brand.
Absolutely.
And we are witnessing it. And we got tangible, quantified evidence to that. And that's a path that we are on. And, and McLaren is really elevating it to the next level for us.
Well, that's a fitting end to our chat. Thank you so much, Raja and Zach, for taking the time to talk to us and taking us inside the fast lane of McLaren and the world of global marketing. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated.